Healing from brain injury has a lot of layers. There are brain injury symptoms, but there's also the physical side of it, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual side. And at Hope Survives, we believe in integrating all of this into a full picture of brain injury recovery. Today, we're going to dive deeper into the emotional health side of living with brain injury as we talk about overcoming fear and anxiety. Dr. Jeremy Schmoe is here to talk about some of the neurological reasons as to why those with brain injuries could be experiencing heightened levels of fear or anxiety. There are actually some real neurological steps for that. And then I'm going to be also sharing some of my experiences of living with this. And hopefully, you will leave this episode feeling more hopeful than when you started. There is always hope, and you are not alone. Hi, I'm Cristabelle Braden, and this is my brain injury podcast, Hope Survives. This is an uplifting podcast to bring hope to your darkest days. As a survivor of traumatic brain injury and multiple concussions and re-injuries, I know what it's like to struggle to find hope. I don't want anyone to feel as alone as I did, and that's why over 10 years ago, I started an online community called Hope After Head Injury, which has now launched into a nonprofit organization called Hope Survives. Hope Survives envisions a world in which every survivor of brain injury and every member of their family are seen, loved, heard, valued, supported, uplifted, and never alone. This podcast is an extension of that, and I'd love to invite you to join along as we explore the realities of life with brain injury, with messages of encouragement, interviews with doctors and professionals, and survivor and family stories. No matter where you're at on your journey, there is always hope. With a little hope, you can make it through today. With a little faith, someday you'll get through the pain. Just a little love is enough to light the way through your darkest night. Hope survives. A little faith, a little love. Hope survives. Hey friends, welcome back to Hope Survives podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We are talking about the topic of overcoming fear and anxiety. And as I mentioned in the intro, at Hope Survives, we believe that there are many layers to living with brain injury and many layers for healing. There's physical health, mental health, spiritual health, and emotional health. And all of these are interlinked and intertwined. Oftentimes in brain injury recovery, one of these might get more emphasized and the others might not be as much. So, for example, if you have been struggling so much with your balance or your vision or your gait or these physical sides of brain injury, all of your therapies end up targeting that, but the emotional side gets left in the dust. Or vice versa, if things are being misdiagnosed or mistreated as mental health. I experienced this when I had a neuropsychologist treat me for anxiety using biofeedback. Now, this is a great tool for many people. However, I had undiagnosed dysautonomia. So my heart would race, but it actually wasn't caused by anxiety or my mental health. The racing of my heart and the feeling on edge was caused from an autonomic nervous system that was in levels of dysfunction. And so if you're being treated so much for the mental health and focusing so much on that, that you're not looking at the physical health sides of what could be going on neurologically, it gets unbalanced that way as well. And so we really try to keep a balanced perspective with brain injury through all of our programs. And as we were founding the organization, it was so important to me that we have a well-rounded view of living with brain injury. And I hope that's what you experience on this podcast as you listen to our panels, as you listen to our interviews, and all of the things that we talk about, because there are a lot of layers. And so today we're diving into fear and anxiety. But as we listen to this, I want you to keep in mind the full picture, right? Feeling on edge sometimes comes from dysautonomia, or there are other aspects. There's spiritual sides, there's mental health sides, emotional and physical health sides. And so we're going to try and tackle all of this together and hope that it will bring you some hope and encouragement today. Over 10 years ago, I first created a page about living with brain injury, and I named it Hope After Head Injury. This was in 2012, and I was a teenager, and I had been living with my brain injury for a couple years at that point. And honestly, I named it Hope After Head Injury because hope was something that I needed desperately. It's exhausting to live with the symptoms of brain injury every single day, to feel misunderstood, to have this invisible injury, and also to have to filter every single activity through the lens of my brain injury. Meaning, if somebody asked me to even just meet up at a coffee shop or hang out with them, my brain has to go, okay, is there going to be noise? Is there going to be lights? Can I do that? What else do I have going on that day? Every single thing felt like it had to filter through brain injury. I didn't get to get my driver's license with the other people. I still don't have it, although I'm working towards it intentionally now. But, I felt like I was falling behind in so many things. And it's exhausting. And hope is a hard concept to talk about. But I hope that all of these episodes bring you some sort of hope. But there was a lot of fear. And fear, I would say, felt like this constant companion. I would wake up anxious every day, often with a headache and fatigue to accompany that. And it's like ups and downs in seasons, right? So it's hard to speak generally about 15 years of my life, but for you guys to get a snapshot and to understand, there were seasons when I felt like I could not function. And then there were seasons when I felt like, okay, I'm doing a little bit better. But then a setback would come, right? And then I started to have fear of setbacks. And so fears would take a lot of different forms, but here's just some examples. I would be afraid and worried that I would not be able to measure up to expectations, other people's expectations of me, but also the expectations that I might have unhealthily put on myself. Even simple things like my sense of smell and taste changed after my brain injury. And I put mustard on my sandwich one day because I found out that I kind of liked it now because my sense of smell and taste was dulled. Before my brain injury, I was a very, very picky eater. And my sister was like, "You don't like mustard." And I was like, "Well, I like it now." And then they'd be like, "You don't like spicy food." I'm like, "Well, I like it now." And because I couldn't taste very well. And then it would feel like I was constantly competing with my old self versus my new self, and then I wasn't measuring up. And so I had a lot of anxiety around that. I also experienced fears of possible re injury and setbacks and trying to do everything I could to avoid. Now, this is a true story. I used to wear a helmet cap inside of my ball caps all the time because I kept getting re-injuries. I would get into a car and hit my head on the car door frame, or, coming up, I hit my head on a refrigerator shelf coming up, like I was searching in a drawer and I came up and I had no spatial awareness to understand that. And so I was hitting my head so much. And at the time, we did not have the right treatment. I didn't even know what the proprioceptive system was. I didn't even know about vestibular therapy. All I knew was I couldn't stop hitting my head. And so in order to combat that, I found this helmet insert that you could put in ball caps, and I would put it inside hats like this. I would put it inside my wide brimmed hats. I would put it inside my ball caps. And this was when I was in college, and everyone knew me as the hat girl. And I still wear hats a lot. They help with my light sensitivity, but I literally wore a helmet 24/7 out of fear. And if I forgot it, I was so anxious. It was like a protection or a comfort for me. And I know helmets don't fully prevent concussion. If you fall, it's not going to prevent the brain bumping, but it will help with the little bumps here and there. It did help. At least I felt like it helped me at that time. I also had a pink hard hat because I was doing a lot of concerts, and there were times when the stages were being set up and there was a lot of things that could potentially fall on my head. So I had this pink hard hat that I would wear. Of course it was pink. Had to have style, you know. But the fear was so strong of the re-injury that literally I was wearing helmets all the time. And also, I would be scared walking up and down steps. I would be just like constantly afraid everywhere I was going. So that was really hard. And then if I like had a balance problem, or if I did tap my head on something, I would be so afraid that I was getting another injury. And sometimes it was. Sometimes I did get diagnosed with another concussion, and other times it was just some sort of flare up. It took a long time for me to figure out the difference and how to navigate that. And that's partly what kind of led to me wanting to do this podcast, is out of so many years of all those struggles. But I'm going to continue talking about some of the fears. Another one was feeling distrustful, not trusting my memory, and being afraid of forgetting important things. I would meet the same people over and over again. And I remember one time I met this girl, and she was like, I said, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you." And then she's like, "We've met 3 times." And I remember that because that had such an impact on me, because I literally felt like this was a complete stranger. I had no memory of ever meeting her. And I started to be afraid. And then my mind started to go, and then I would go, what are all the things in my life that I've forgotten? Are there important things in my life that I don't remember? And then I started to just spiral and have anxiety of that, which I want to encourage you that there's grace in all of this, but I'm trying to put you where my mindset was at the time before I lead you towards the hope and grace, right? So if you can relate, you're not alone. Another one is uncertainty around the future, and if I would ever move forward from this brain injury. I didn't know if I would ever be able to make it through things. And when I first had my brain injury in the first couple of years, we finally ended up at a well-known, reputable hospital for pediatrics. And they told my parents that I would probably never finish high school, that I was going to be disabled and dependent on them the rest of my life. And that was the narrative that we were told at the time. While I do still have struggles, I've healed so much, and brain injury research has come so far in 15 years. I not only have a college degree, I have a master's degree. And yeah, I had to do it slower, and I had to use accommodations, and I had to do it differently. But from doctors telling my parents I'd never finish high school, to sitting here doing a podcast as founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization with a master's degree, I mean, I had no idea the hope that was coming. At the time, I just felt like, I don't think I'm ever going to get out of this, because that's what we're being told. So that's hard. That's really hard to live with. And if you're there, I want to encourage you. There is hope. There's so much hope for the future of brain injury. But in the moment, it's hard. And so that was like one of the big things, right? Like education or moving forward. Am I ever going to find someone who's going to love me and get married? Am I ever going to have any level of independence? I'm watching all of my peers surpass me and move forward beyond me. And I felt stuck. It felt like the world was spinning and I couldn't keep up. I would be so afraid of going to new environments. What if there's too much light or too much noise or too many crowds? And it was very, very challenging to be able to go anywhere. And I would always try to go with somebody. It helped I didn't have my driver's license, and still don't, that I'm usually with somebody if I'm going anywhere. But I would just have this anxiety over going anywhere new. So I had my little kit in my purse. I'd always keep my noise canceling earbuds. I would always keep my earplugs, sunglasses, hat, try and do everything I could to protect myself going into a new environment. And there's good reason to do that. I'm not saying not to do that. What I am saying is that in so doing that, it wasn't like I do now, which is like, I'm going to bring these just in case I need them with confidence. It was, I have to have these or else, like, I had so much fear and anxiety if I would forget something like that. And I also would feel anxious about my symptoms and if I could make it through. Just the daily life of brain injury, whenever a headache would onset, I would also have anxiety onset because I couldn't differentiate my symptoms from my identity. I'm going to say that again. I couldn't differentiate my symptoms from my identity. So when a headache would set in or when I'd have a symptom flare up, I internalized that, and I took that to mean that I was not enough, and I started to feel like I wasn't going to make it through, and I would have these thought patterns going over and over in my head and blaming myself and feeling like I was never good enough and just really, really spiraling down. And it wasn't a symptom problem for me. It was an anxiety problem, and it was a identity issue. And I was not able to distinguish who I was outside of the brain injury. And in 2016, I ended up writing a song called More to Me. And it's about how there's more to me than the brain injury, because songwriting is how I often think through things. Music was a big part of my journey through brain injury. I wasn't able to express myself with words due to aphasia and word finding and emotional dysregulation. But for some reason, in music and lyrics, things clicked the way that they didn't in any other way. So songwriting became the way that I expressed myself. I never wrote a song before the brain injury, but I wrote this song called More to Me, and you can hear it anywhere, like YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify. It's out anywhere. But the song says, "Who have I become, wrapped up in a memory? Where did I go wrong? It's been so long, and every time I try to make sense of anything, find that I'm stressed about everything. This isn't who I used to be. When the waves came and when the storm raged, found myself falling into the ground. When the wind blew, that's when it fell through, and I don't know how to turn it around. I know there's more to me than the wreckage you see. There's more to be, but I'm still on the journey." And the second verse says, "When did I become my own worst enemy? Where did I go wrong and start to think that every time I make a mistake in anything, I'll never come back. I'll never be the person that I want to be." And it goes back to when the waves came, and it goes into that. I know there's more to me than the wreckage you see. There's more to be, but I'm still on the journey. It's like I had this plea where I knew that there was more to me, and I wanted to believe it so bad, but I wasn't there yet. I was still on that journey. And the bridge of the song says, "I've had some hard days, had some sleepless nights, and I've been afraid of giving up the fight." There's that fear. "And I'm more than what happened to me, but it's still part of my story." And that was where I landed. That was where the Lord showed me, yes, I'm more than what happened to me, but this is part of my story and it's part of my testimony. When I was so exhausted all the time and it felt like my mind was constantly going in circles, there were times that hope felt out of reach and that healing was something I would never experience. And if you can relate to that, I want you to know that you are not alone. Brain injury is hard. Living with brain injury, it's one of the most difficult things because you can't express yourself right. You can't think right. It affects your identity. It affects your communication. It affects your relationships. It affects the ability for you to connect with the people around you and to do the things that you feel meant to do. Brain injury affects all of that. So it is hard. But at the same time as brain injury is hard and this is frustrating. At the same time, you can hold hope. You can hold this is hard and I have hope together. These things don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can have fear and anxiety, but it's what you do with it that matters. Are we going to sit and wallow in it? Are we going to follow that downward spiral? Because in me, I'm faith is everything to me. The Lord is the reason I have hope. And so when I experience that, finding a way to go to prayer or to call a friend that I know is going to speak life into me, or attend a Hope Survives support group, or go outside for a walk and just breathe in the fresh air and just say, Lord, I know there's more to me, but I don't feel like it right now. But taking small steps of hope and trust and faith, because these fears do not define you. And you are so much more than your brain injury, and there is hope for every single day. So, with that, I want to introduce Dr. Jeremy Schmoe. We are so thankful for Dr. Schmoe's support of Hope Survives and the Functional Neurology Center's sponsorship of this podcast. I want to share that he is about to talk to you guys about the neurological side of brain injury and fear and anxiety. Because this is not only an emotional or a mental health thing, this is also a physical process of your brain. And there are real reasons for why you might feel stuck in these cycles and stuck in these loops. Dr. Schmoe has expertise in brain injury, and he can say it a lot better than I can. And so we want to thank the Functional Neurology Center for being a sponsor of Hope Survives podcast. Their personalized neuro recovery programs offer hope for those suffering from brain injuries, dysautonomia, vestibular chronic pain, stroke, movement dysfunction, developmental disorders, PPPD, FND, and complex post-concussion. So you can find more at thefnc.com. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Schmoe here, and then we'll come back.
With fear and anxiety, you have to think about it from, is this a reflexogenic system that's getting triggered and causing fear and anxiety? Because that could be a reality where you have some problems, say, with your eye movements or your eye tracking or your perception of where you are in space. And when you get into certain situations, that could just reflexively overstimulate your system and you don't have control over it. And that happens when people have concussions and injuries, and then you impair gating in the brain. So, one of the biggest fears that I would say that my patients have is, well, one would be driving. Driving, too much movement and motion, that could definitely cause a lot of fear and anxiety with people, especially if you're, you had an injury and you're unable to drive before. Now you're like getting back into things, and now you have to get into these different environments that your brain's not used to. Um, I have all sorts of strategies that I use with people to kind of like recalibrate that and get that back in action. But another one would be the grocery store, like going grocery store, Target, anything that's got too much motion, too much movement can definitely be overstimulating for the brain. But I think people need to dose themselves effectively, meaning you have to get some of that stimulation, but then have strategies to integrate and calm yourself down. And also understanding why educationally, you need to know why you're feeling that way in the first place. So if you don't know why you're reflexively getting anxious or feel these symptoms, then that makes it even scarier. So, one of the first steps is understanding how your nervous system works, from the neuronal system to how the sensory systems integrate to how gravity is a player. And that's the point of, Hope After Head Injury, is to educate people to understand why their system might go into that reflexive anxiety. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is with injuries, there's definitely trauma that comes from these injuries, and it triggers genetics and it changes areas of the brain that might be involved with fear and anxiety, such as the amygdala and the cingulate cortex, and, other areas of the brain that are involved with these different networks and these hubs that can fire you into these more kind of primitive fight or flight states. So working with functional neurology is a great idea, but also, EMDR, cognitive behavioral therapy, those are all really good strategies to help combat that and get those circuits to kind of calm down. Even doing like neurofeedback could be a great idea. Um, Another thing with fear and anxiety to consider is brain neuroimmune components like brain based inflammation. And inflammation in the brain can cause you to feel anxious because these neurons are like close to the threshold and they fire unstable easily. So, working on gut health and nutrition and those things can also be really beneficial to decrease inflammation, which can help with anxiety and it can help modulate, specific neurotransmitter levels. But if you're just looking at it just from like a patient standpoint, I would break it down into, all right, is this like a metabolic thing where my system is just like so close to threshold because I'm inflamed? Is it a fear anxiety component where maybe there's some things that I could do with different strategies to work on my cognitive behavioral system to understand it, to help reprogram your thoughts and work with that from more of that kind of neural emotional standpoint? Or is it just something reflexive in nature where you don't have any control over it and you could do all the cognitive behavioral and all the stuff in the world, but your eyes are still doing some sort of movement, so your brain thinks that you're off balance and then you're getting all this information in. So, and from my standpoint, I was trying to figure out what the actual problem is and then getting very specific with that. So, we work with really good, I have some hypnotherapists that I refer to. I have some EMDR therapists and like brain spotting, EEG, like neurofeedback therapists. So if my things aren't the thing for you and it's something else, we might need to look into those other things and make sure that we are doing what your brain needs to get you better. Like I always say, there's not just one specific therapy for brain injury. There's multiple different therapies, but where functional neurology can come in is trying to figure out like what actually makes sense for you. So you're spending your time and your energy doing something that is appropriate and you're not going to waste your time.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. One of the biggest fears that people often share is that they are stuck like this or that they're never going to get better after their brain injury. We hear it in our support groups, especially people who've just recently gotten their injuries. So, what
Yeah.
hope would you give people for healing, improvement, recovery, and the future of brain injury rehab?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the future of brain injury rehab, it's so big right now. There's so many different professions and specialists that are really diving into this, ranging from, functional neurology to occupational therapy. Like we just added on like an amazing occupational therapist that does MNRI. It's a neural reflex integration technique to people are really diving into hormones and blood work for traumatic brain injuries, and people weren't doing that like 10 years ago, looking at everything that needed to be, they were doing it in a research setting. We're talking about like actually like clinical. It's like, say you're in the middle of nowhere, all right, you don't have access to all of these different therapies. Well, you got the internet for the most part, possibly, where you have all of these support groups and different people that are out there like Hope Survives and other programs where you have access to all the education virtually all around the planet. So if you feel like, oh, there's no providers by me, well, you got access to people virtually. You can do virtual rehabilitation and you can connect with people, which is amazing. And a lot of that really changed with COVID, 5 years ago, where now there's virtual programs that you could do where you can make some progress with just doing things really low tech at home. And, if you get to that point where you're not getting better doing things virtually or working on diet and nutrition, there's a lot of different programs that are out there. Previously there wasn't a lot of like big, uh, say functional neurology clinics, but they're everywhere now. There's so many different people that are thinking this way and providers that are thinking this way. It's definitely worth searching out and trying to find somebody. Especially if you feel like you're just stuck in whatever system that you're at and you're not getting access to this. It's like you got to go outside that system and you got to reach out and you got to try and find some other providers that they might be in your area. You just might not being, people might not tell you about them. um, they're out there. You got to search and you got to look, and that's the point of this program, is to help people find the right people that can get them better.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schmoe, for those insights for us on fear and anxiety. I love how he reminded us that there are circuits in our brain that can kind of get stuck on these loops, right? And it could be inflammation, there could be other reasons for it, but exploring and understanding that neurologically, brain injury is going to affect so much more than just the symptoms and the headaches. Brain injury affects every aspect of life. And so being able to get treated, and we have a lot of other episodes about this, about treatment options, about hope, about ways that you can tackle some of these practical sides of living with brain injury because it's all related. And the more that you learn to take those steps of hope, I mean, even just making changes in your nutrition can be a step of hope towards overcoming fear and anxiety. It's not always journaling and mental health practices, which those are great. And there are a lot of studies that show the link between gratitude and reduced anxiety. And we're going to talk about some of that next month. This month, we're talking about overcoming fear and anxiety as a little preview. Next month in November, we're going to be talking about gratitude. And that is following this topic for a reason because overcoming fear and anxiety can happen through gratitude. And like I said, there are some neurological studies that show the effects of gratitude on reducing anxiety and reducing cortisol. And it is incredible what gratitude can do. If you're listening to this when we're releasing it in October 2025, you might be listening to it later. And I understand I have people tell me that they just discovered the podcast this year and they're listening to our episodes from 5 years ago. So, hello, future people. You might be in the future right now. But if you're listening to this in the present while I'm recording it, we have a workshop coming up at the end of this month called Harvesting Hope, a gratitude gathering. And it's myself and my mom, who I love my mom. You might have seen her, Mama Braden, on the podcast before. And we are going to be talking about how do we carry gratitude into the often difficult holiday season. And it's a free workshop. Sign up on our website. We would love to have you be part of it. You can come alone or you can come with a loved one, whether you want to come with a friend or a family member and do it together or as a couple. We talked about it in our Hope for Couples group as a great option for couples to attend together to help strengthen their marriage. There are a lot of ways that you can attend this and participate in this workshop, but we are going to be talking about harvesting hope and gratitude and the importance of gratitude. And so, if you can relate to the fear and anxiety, I want to encourage you to choose a step of hope. Take a practical step of hope because living with brain injury is a journey of ups and downs, but every day we have a choice, right? We can acknowledge the fears and our very real feelings of going through something deeply traumatic while also choosing to take steps of faith every day towards a brighter tomorrow. If we ignore our fears altogether, it can cause things to be bottled up, which does not always end well. So we do need to be honest with ourselves. But we also don't want to focus on our fears and anxieties so much that we end up losing hope. This is where a really good therapist or neuropsychologist can help you to work through some of these strategies. As Dr. Schmoe mentioned, maybe a functional neurologist or a concussion specialist or somebody that can help you to reset some of those circuits, wherever you are in your journey. Finding professional help is one of the best things you can do, as well as seeking out uplifting friends and community around you to speak life into you. Maybe it's a church family or joining a Bible study group, or sometimes I just need to call and pray with a friend or come to a Hope Survive support group. And we are going to be doing an Advent series called Light in the Darkness this December that I'll be leading. And I hope you can join us there. But we've got groups. We've got Hope for Couples. We've got Hope for family members to attend without the person that sustained a brain injury. We also have Hope After Head Injury. We have Found Connection and Renewed by Faith. Those are our monthly support groups, always happening. HopeSurvives.org will give you everything. So if you need to connect with someone, please come and attend. You can just listen, you can keep your camera off, or you can turn it on and talk however you're comfortable. But maybe you just need to put on some music or a podcast to encourage yourself. Go for a walk in nature, but Whatever it is, I want to invite you to take a step of hope. So if it's signing up for a support group, signing up for our Harvesting Hope gratitude gathering, signing up or attending something in your local community. Maybe you're going to volunteer at a library or join a book club or something at your church or find a church to go to. Whatever it is, finding something that keeps you less isolated. Maybe for you, you're around people too much and is way too anxious for you, and you need less people and more time on your own. So maybe it's going for a walk or spending time with the Lord, listening to a podcast, whatever it is, take a step of faith. And all of these steps first start with acknowledging where you're at, that you might need some help, and starting a journey of hope one step at a time. I opened up this podcast talking about when I first made the page called Hope After Head Injury. And at that time, I never could have foreseen that someday we'd have a nonprofit organization helping others going through brain injury all across the world. The truth is, when I started that page, I just needed hope every day, and I was so tired. But that's where hope survives. It survives in the hard moments where the light shines through the darkness, and you're not alone. So we'd love to invite you to get involved. Make sure you're signed up for the Hope Journal, which is our monthly newsletter. I wrote a letter this month talking about overcoming fear and anxiety, and some of the points that I shared in today's podcast are in that letter. I also would love to, like I said, invite you to join a group, connect with us on social media, leave a rating or review, and or drop a comment. We want to hear from you, and you're not alone. You can email us hi@hopesurvives.org. We'd love to connect. You are not alone. We have a panel coming up in just a couple weeks on overcoming fear and anxiety, and I know that's going to be encouraging. Listen to the panels, get encouragement from others, and know that there's hope on your journey. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Hope Survives podcast. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, and would love for you to consider leaving us a rating or a review. Check out hopesurvives.org for more. We'll see you next time, and remember, there is always hope.